The U.S. Surgeon General today declared a new public health epidemic in America: loneliness.
I'm 21 years old and I have no friends.
I'm really exhausted from being alone. From waking up to no calls, no texts, and no checkups.
People don't have time for each other. Like, it's just something that I think about a lot, how capitalism robs us of our time, and how even in our leisure time, we're constantly turning to social media or streaming services.
Guys, I've been thinking, and for real, we need to be going out more. Like, what are we doing? We need to be going out.
The rate of living alone, that's risen consistently for the last 60 years.
As Americans, we've removed everything we actually need in daily life, like exercise, talking to friends, connecting with people, spending time with our kids. We've taken all of the naturally occurring things out of life.
Parents have a hard time getting their kids to socialize because nowadays, the way that capitalism is, we've made it so that the only way to have socialization of your children is to pay for something.
How much capitalism and consumerism overall benefits from us being lonely, individualistic, and not part of communities. The solution to all of our problems has been sold to us as, just go buy it.
So much of our struggles as parents, feeling like we're bad parents, feeling like we're irritable, like we're impatient, we're touched out, we're overstimulated, so much of that we are made to feel as though that is a failing on our part, when really it's a failing on society's part.
Capitalism in its heyday brought us the highest standard of living the world had ever known. Its focus on efficiency and scale allowed us to spread our wings and create the lives in which we desire. In doing so, capitalism removed our need to rely on others, as for the first time in history, we could fend for ourselves independently. But this breakdown of community in capitalism's quest to commodify everything has led to family relations dissolving. And now in a world where we are arguably more connected than ever, we find ourselves lonelier than ever. This leaves us wondering if we can maintain this economic growth-based society without losing touch of each other completely. So let's talk about it. How the nuclear family was created to monetize and isolate individuals, how in 2024 we found ourselves in a loneliness epidemic, and what we can do moving forward to get ourselves back to a social society. The first instance of community being affected by capitalism was in the death of the traditional family. When we think of the traditional family, we think of a 1950s home with a working dad, a stay-at-home mom, and 2 children. But the thing is, this is not actually the traditional family. Before capitalism stepped in, the traditional family consisted of a mother, a father, the children, but also the grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone who was around. In this environment where the economy was mostly based on agricultural production, a larger family was preferred for survival. Whoever was willing and able to stick around on the family farm stayed, as the land was their source of economic success. Both males and females, old and young, contributed in various ways for the survival of the household, whether that was working in the fields, taking care of young children, or working on goods for sale. The family of the Middle Ages was an all-encompassing social unit, bound together by the need to survive economically. The biggest change to this family dynamic was after the Industrial Revolution, which brought on wage labor, something we're very familiar with today. As early factories opened, owners began to hire workers from outside their immediate family. For the first time ever, work and home had been separated, and this came with changes to the family. As wages men were earning from these jobs grew sufficient to support their families, there was a shift from agriculture to industry, and slowly women and children withdrew from the labor market. By the time we reached the 1900s, the male breadwinner family was the dominant family structure in the middle class, and is now what we call the nuclear family. With no more physical labor requirements from multiple bodies to survive, families started breaking off from their extended family and creating a path of their own. This also gave birth to the suburban home, and as we know, during these times, fathers would go to work, leaving their family during their productive hours, children would go to school, leaving their family during their productive hours, and women would usually stay home tending to the house all day, as it was now a single person operation to run a household. But as we know, this 1950s family structure didn't last forever, and women did start re-entering into the workforce for multiple reasons, like labor shortages during war times, but also with the decrease in household maintenance requirements, as modern household appliances and fewer children freed up women's time. But once we got into the 70s, women started fighting back against the system as they declared the nuclear family to be a tomb for women. Women who were traditionally working their homes as a larger unit were now spending their productive hours in an empty house, stripped of purpose and relational connection that the traditional family had once filled her with. It only took women a couple decades to realize that they got the short end of the stick and it wasn't working for them anymore. The women's rights movement continued to grow in the late 70s and 80s, with the increased cost of living and recession requiring women to go back to work. Many women joined their husbands in the workforce and created this new form of the nuclear family, which consisted of 2 working parents and 2.5 children. But as capitalists, this just meant more opportunity for economic growth. Now that we're dealing with dual income households, there's potential for more money to be spent. And this just added fuel to the fire of reasons for the cost of living to increase. Now looking back, this 1950s family structure never stood a chance to survive an economy that requires constant growth and the desire for more. Before moving on to capitalism's effect on modern society, I do want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, who is Ritual. Specifically, Ritual's Symbiotic Plus. You've probably seen a lot of probiotics on the market, but does your probiotic have both a prebiotic and a postbiotic? Ritual's Symbiotic Plus has all 3, which is why I made the switch over to optimize my gut health. Ritual's Symbiotic Plus uses 2 of the most studied probiotic strains in the world, which provide live microorganisms to contribute to a healthy gut microflora. The prebiotics support the growth of beneficial bacteria, and the postbiotic supports gut barrier function by feeding the lining of the colon. If you don't think probiotics are a big deal or you don't need them, 70% of the immune system's function is actually located in the gut. I love how easy it is to take 2, just 1 daily capsule taken at any time helps battle those day-to-day disturbances like eating food I know I shouldn't be eating, or the stress of motherhood, things that can just throw off your body. I also love that Ritual's Symbiotic Plus has a delayed release capsule that is designed to help reach the colon, which is the ideal place for probiotics to survive and grow. That combined with the Symbiotic Plus being science-based, third-party tested, with traceable ingredients, makes me feel very confident in these probiotics actually doing what I need them to do. I've definitely felt a difference in my body since taking the Symbiotic Plus. I've been dealing with bloating for years, and this helps me feel less bloated for sure. One of the other things that might seem super minuscule but makes a huge difference is the flavor of these. These have a really minty smell and taste, which makes them really enjoyable to take. And that brings me on to a couple other products they sent me as well, which is their omega-3 and their Hyacera supplement for skin hydration. I honestly enjoy taking these every night all together because again, they taste so good. The omega-3s, which I need to restock on, smell and taste like orange. And that's huge because omega-3s are pretty gross to take normally, but these actually taste really good. And the Hyacera is my favorite to take because it smells and tastes like vanilla, or it tastes how you think vanilla should taste. It's so good. So if you want to try the Symbiotic Plus for yourself, or the other products for, like I said, skin hydration or omega-3s, which are very important to me because they help balance out all the omega-6s that we intake in modern society, you can scan the QR code on the screen here or go to the link in the description and use code EMBERSASH for 25% off your first order. Thank you so much to Ritual for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back into capitalism. The isolation of nuclear families didn't end with just owning your own home either. We see this as families and communities are continually being broken down into smaller segments. On top of children needing to leave the nest at 18, we're finding more and more that they're not just leaving the nest, but they're leaving the state or the country in hopes for a better or just different life. From a capitalism perspective, this is a great move because even buying your own house separate from your family and community but in the same area still provides some security. But But uprooting your life and leaving means more financial pressure to 100% rely on yourself and the system. And this isolation of the self or central unit has led to a new phenomenon, which is a hyper-individualist society. While individualism is the habit or principle of being independent or self-reliant, hyper-individualism is the state of mind where you believe that you're the center of the universe. Hyper-individualism is also intertwined with economics and consumption. It represents a shift from a cooperative and mutual support system to a money, market-based goods and services provider system. This means that people stop relying on others and start relying on economic stability as a support system. People realize that they believe money is the primary source in their life, and as long as they are receiving that money, they will be complete. Seeing that capitalism thrives off people fending for themselves, hyper-individualism is a natural progression. If you stop relying on community and instead on the economy for your stability, then everyone around you becomes competition instead of your teammates.
The real trap of capitalism is that you're working so hard that you want to live alone. The thought of living with your family, the thought of living with a bunch of other people is so exhausting to even entertain that notion. You need your peace, you need your quiet, you need your isolation so that you can have your morning routine, your night routine. You don't want to cook with someone else talking to you in the kitchen. You don't have any energy left over. So to afford this lifestyle, you work more and more and more. And the more you work, the more isolation you crave, and therefore the more expensive your requirements become. Whereas if you worked half the hours, you might have double the energy and be able to live with double the people and pay half the rent. You might find you no longer need such a rigorous morning and night routine. You no longer need so much peace, so much quiet, so much isolation, and you don't even need as much money.
Hyper-individualism is also great for the economy because it creates the perfect consumer. We saw this first with the creation of the nuclear family. When living as single family units, everyone needs one of everything. Every family needs their own home, their own car, their own TV, their own toaster. Many things that are used once a week, once a month, maybe even once a year, still need to be bought by every household despite the lack of use for the odd occasion that you use it. For example, when living in the traditional family, you could get away with owning, say, one hammer for all the 20 people in your family, instead of 5 hammers for every nuclear family of 4. And those extra 4 hammer purchases is what drives economic growth. As you can see, the more we separate ourselves from others, the more we need to buy to support ourselves. Like I said, hyper-individualism puts a lot of value on money as the primary source of support in life. As long as you have money, then you don't need community, and so it's sort of an endless cycle of buying your way out of community and then not having community, so you need to buy more of your independence, which means you're losing out on more community. And as time went on, we also know that technological advances have separated ourselves from others even more. For instance, with the rise of online shopping versus trips to the mall. Shopping in outlet malls, which once represented a gathering place for both young teenagers and elderly people alike, are closing, left vacant, or struggling to survive. Even window shopping can be done without spending money, making malls a no-cost public space conducive to conversation and simple hangout. But the rise of e-commerce offers benefits that most malls cannot match, like the ability to browse infinite options and have items delivered for low cost or free. And the same effect happens with a lot of other aspects of life. With all the money we're spending on streaming services, there's less incentive to call up a friend and go to the movie theater. There was, of course, the death of the arcade as the video game industry took over our homes. On top of that, Uber and other delivery services mean that we don't even need to go to the store for our groceries or other goods. And I'm not saying that this is all necessarily bad. I have an Amazon Prime membership like everybody else, but these advances did take away a lot of our natural opportunity for social interaction. We went from a society that lived off of micro interactions with strangers to one that can fully opt out of social interactions if we desire. In recent years, the flaws of this system have been brought to light as the standard of living has started to succumb to capitalist greed. A lot of us are feeling the financial squeeze right now of this economy, and for some of us, that almost feels like the nail in the coffin for our social lives. As financial pressure grows, people don't have as much time to see each other, and maintaining friendships gets increasingly more difficult. It's hard to see people when you spend all your time working multiple jobs, commuting to a city further away for a better paying job, caring for children alone, and all the basic tasks required to run your household on your own. A big change we see in the way we spend our time in recent years is with the increase in side hustles. These tough economic times mean that for a lot of people, the 9-to-5 isn't cutting it anymore, and they need side hustles to make ends meet.
I know I'm probably just being so dramatic and annoying, But this is my first job, like my first 9-to-5 job after college, and I'm in person, and I'm commuting in the city, and it takes me forever to get there. There's no way I'm going to be able to afford living in the city right now, so that's off the table. Like, so it literally takes me, like, I leave here, like, I get on the train at 7:30, and I don't get home till, like, 6:15 earliest, and then, like, I don't have time to do anything. I want to shower, eat my dinner, and go to sleep. I don't have time or energy to cook my dinner either. Like, I don't have energy to work out. Like, that's out the window. Like, I'm so upset. I literally get off, it's pitch black. Like, I don't have energy. How do you have friends? Like, how do you have time to, like, meet, like, a guy? I don't know. Like, how do you have time for, like, dating? Like, I don't have time for anything, and I'm, like, so stressed out.
Just recently, we saw with the ban on TikTok, creators coming forward saying that this isn't just a fun app, but a necessity for their financial survival in this economy. So in our list of priorities, socializing usually gets kicked to the bottom when so many other things need more of our time. The reality is that there are only so many hours in a day, and for most people, most of those hours are taken up by some form of labor, leaving little time and less energy left over for friendship. Public places that used to be used for socializing are now being used sparingly as people can't afford it anymore and don't have the time for it. And this can turn into a never-ending cycle. For example, financial insecurity may require someone to work multiple jobs, resulting in less leisure time and limiting opportunities for social participation and connection, which in turn could provide fewer resources and financial opportunities.
Today I got both TikToks about like, you shouldn't live to work, you should work to live. And then the next TikTok was like, to live comfortably in America, you need to be making a minimum of $100,000 a year. Unfortunately, the way society is set up, to enjoy your life, you always have to be making more money. It's always like the answer is making more money. I feel like I see so many like financial guru people on here trying to like give you these like next like hot tips, and it's always make more money. And it's like, that is not the most attainable thing for everyone. That's like, some people can't just pick up a second or third job. Some people can't do side hustles and whatever. And then you know what you're doing? Then you're living to work. And that's what you have to do to make more money. It's just this impossible cycle.
If we're only ever digging ourselves out of this hole that keeps getting deeper with the rise of cost of living, the housing crisis, and the rise of credit card debt, we will never have time for what we actually need, which is community. This has led us to what is now called the loneliness epidemic. Last year, the United States Surgeon General released an advisory calling attention to the public health crisis of loneliness. A 2022 study found that when people were asked how close they felt to others emotionally, only 39% of adults in the US said that they felt very connected to others. Almost half of Americans in 2021 reported having 3 or fewer close friends. Only a quarter reported the same in 1990.
This has been on my mind a lot recently, because I've realized that every single girl I know in my life, every woman in her 20s that I know, has been feeling lonely lately for some reason.
I'm tired of feeling like my conversation is a burden to someone else's life. I'm tired of driving around for hours and wishing someone was in the passenger seat laughing with me. I'm tired of wondering what it is about me that makes me the problem.
Recently, my life has been consumed by loneliness. I spend 6 out of 7 days a week alone without any human contact. The only day I see and speak to people is when I'm in the office for work. My friends and family are all at different stages of their lives to me. Some have a partner, some have a house, some have a baby, and some have all 3. Then there's me, a 26-year-old who's renting a flat, working full-time, and has a crippling phone addiction.
So clearly people are lonely, but it does raise the question of what qualifies as being lonely. You might think that it's just from being alone, but social isolation and loneliness aren't actually the same thing. Loneliness has been defined by mental health professionals as a gap between the level of connectedness that you want and what you have. It's not the same as social isolation, which is codified in the social sciences as a measure of a person's contacts. Loneliness is a subjective feeling. People can have a lot of contact and still be lonely, or be perfectly perfectly content by themselves. Now, an epidemic of loneliness might seem strange and not that big of a deal, but they've actually found a lot of negative health effects associated with loneliness. The effect of loneliness on the body can lead to dementia, cardiovascular disease, weaker immune systems, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Loneliness is so bad that they've actually concluded that lacking social connection can increase the risk of premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. These are wild conclusions which you might have a hard time connecting with loneliness, but the root cause of this all is actually from inflammation. Evidence shows that being objectively isolated or even the perception of isolation can increase inflammation to the same degree as physical inactivity. Similarly, lower social support is associated with higher inflammation. Chronic inflammation throughout the body has been linked to various chronic illnesses across the lifespan that increase the risk of premature mortality. Thus, inflammation may be a common pathway that explains the many diverse health outcomes associated with isolation and loneliness. After going through the pandemic, I don't think it's that surprising that there's a lot of loneliness in society, but what may be a surprise is that this has actually been going on since before 2020. In 2018, a study by the Kaiser Family Foundation found that 1 in 5 Americans said that they always or often felt lonely or socially isolated. Murthy had actually called the problem an epidemic in 2017, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the pandemic only accelerated the timeline to loneliness that we were already on. It may have brought on new levels of loneliness as we were abruptly separated from those around us, but the system we live in was already pushing us away from each other. Besides the health effects of the loneliness epidemic, there have also been massive social implications. We know that the country is feeling more divided than ever right now, and the hyper-individualized culture that led to the loneliness epidemic is only making things worse. 1972 showed that roughly 45% of Americans felt they could reliably trust other Americans. However, that proportion shrank to roughly 30% in 2016. In 2018, only 16% of Americans reported that they felt attached to their local community. The problem with isolating into smaller and smaller groups is that it reduces empathy for others and increases indifference. Instead of seeing each other as assets to the community, they turn into strangers and competition. Living integrated with society helps get us out of our own heads, helps us with our daily struggles, and even reduce the rat race. Being on our own can make us feel like we're falling behind, we're not good enough, which leads to villainizing others. When we're able to connect with strangers, it humanizes them and increases our empathy because all of a sudden they're in a way part of our group. I think a lot of us have been feeling this disconnect with community and maybe thought we were the only ones. We see so much socialization on social media that it can feel like we're the only ones who haven't gone back to a normal life since the pandemic. But we're finding more and more that social media is less of a platform for people to share with their friends and more of an influencer platform. And so seeing influencers going out and having fun because it's their job gives us a skewed view of what society is actually like right now. Because as we now know statistically, we are no longer living in a culture of connection. Moving on to the positive, let's talk about what solutions we have for this situation we found ourselves in. The most popular solution in this battle of loneliness is the increase of third places. If you didn't know about third places, they are public spaces crucial for neighborhoods as a space to integrate, gather, meet, and talk, often with little to no cost of entry. If the first place is home and the second place is work or school, the third place is a place that you can socialize with people who are not found in either.
There's not many places, neighborhoods and cities where it's super easy to walk everywhere, where you can get a lot of natural exercise, whether it's walking to and from your house or to the grocery stores. This just doesn't exist for most people now. So you have to wake up early or on your lunch break or after work. You have to go to the gym so you can get in your exercise. Talking, like people are meant to just talk nonstop, but now we live like really isolated. And then when you are talking, you're probably at work and you're in your professional mode. But people are meant to share their struggles, their stories, everyday thing constantly all the time. And we're not doing that. Kids stuff. There used to be kids running around neighborhoods all the time. Parents didn't have to pay all this extra money to do activities so that their kids can be involved in things. Parents didn't have to drive all over the place. No, they opened their door and there was kids everywhere. But now that doesn't exist. So we do need to pay for activities. We need to do special things. We need to be driving our kids all around.
Throughout history, coffee shops, public parks, libraries, salons, and malls have all represented third places. So what we're missing in our North American lives is more opportunity to socialize organically in our day-to-day to day. Now, while we do have some of these third places and they've been around for a while, they're just not getting used as much. Like I mentioned, the increase in technology means that we're getting out of our house less, but also with the cost of living crisis, we can't afford to go out. As the cost of living skyrockets, especially in cities, access to third places becomes gatekept by the imposition or increase in the cost of entry. Coffee shops, historically the archetype of a low-cost and vibrant third place, become less and less accessible as the price of a cup of coffee increases. Bringing it back to the isolation of the family and the lack of third places for them, we live in a world where children are often villainized for being out in public, and so we keep them separate. It seems like if children aren't able to act like adults, then they're not welcomed. Think of the way that children are expected to act in restaurants, at weddings, on plane rides, just quiet and unseen. The thing is, this isn't how children are treated in other places in the world. Like in a lot of European countries, children are accepted and integrated in the day-to-day life. They're often given their own third places. This gives them the opportunities to socialize, of course, but it also leads to parents not feeling so isolated when they do make the choice to have children because those kids aren't invited into their social life. An example of this is Annie Samples, an American mom who's living with her family in Denmark, who shares on Instagram that for Copenhagen residents, playgrounds and parks are a space for the whole family.
Here are a few things you may not know about Copenhagen parks and playgrounds. Most Copenhageners live in apartments, so our parks function as our backyards and are super important for family time and socializing, so we really need them to be equipped to meet our needs. Most importantly, parks and playgrounds here have clean and functional public restrooms with diaper changing stations. Thanks, tax dollars. Secondly, of course we need to eat, so parks here often have restaurants, coffee kiosks, and even beer, wine, or the occasional Aperol Spritz. And yes, drinking in Danish parks and playgrounds is completely legal. We also have a number of staffed playgrounds which have indoor play areas with board games, activities, toys and vehicles they loan out. There are sometimes animals there to learn about, and they often host community programs. Overall, I think the city does such a good job of providing the perfect backdrop to let the good times roll.
Another example of this is the Norwegian Railway, which have family-friendly cartridges with room to park strollers, play areas for the kids, books to read, and TVs with kid shows playing. The family-friendly train includes children in the travel experience, accommodating for families and making them feel comfortable for the duration of the trip. American mom Kelly Clancy, who took this train, said that instead of quietly sitting still for the entirety of the ride, they can enjoy a developmentally appropriate area where they can climb, play, and make friends. The family train car allowed Clancy and her husband to sit back, relax, and ease the worries that many parents feel when traveling with children, like disturbing child-free passengers. So often, parents become homebodies just because of the society that they're bringing these children into. It can feel like too much work to try and keep your children on their best behavior for an hour in a restaurant, or to put the kids on a plane ride where you know that they aren't capable of sitting down and being quiet for that long.
Yesterday, I took my kids to our neighborhood public pool, which has a specific little toddler pool for younger kids that they can play in and feel a little more independent. And they met some other kids and they played for like 2 hours. And then I took them to a restaurant that had a playground outside, and I sat at our outdoor table while they played with other little kids. And then we went home, and the whole time, you know, this whole day, they were calm, regulated, happy kids. And it really made me realize that so much of our struggles as parents, feeling like we're bad parents, feeling like we're irritated, so much of that we are made to feel as though that is a failing on our part, when really it's a failing on society's part. There are not enough third spaces for children. There are not spaces that are accessible to children.
And now that I'm aware of this phenomenon of isolating children, I've been taking note when environments are actually welcoming to kids. One instance of this was a brewery in the Lower Mainland here that actually created a kids corner so the parents could sit and enjoy their beers in peace. You can bet that this was a huge hit with parents, as it's such a rare occurrence to find an establishment that's both accommodating for the parents and the children. Mind you, I didn't get the chance to go before the BC liquor branch shut it down, because apparently the kid-friendly area is not compliant with regulations in a liquor primary service area, which is a little bit ridiculous, but while it was around, people loved it. With all that being said, if cities could just create infrastructure that integrated children into the world instead of forcing them to be hidden away, the whole family would get more of these opportunities for micro interactions daily. And with that, we could keep the benefits of capitalism that we love without dealing with these drawbacks. Every time I make one of these video essays, I end up researching a ton of aspects of the topic and figure out my storyline as I go. The thing is, there's always a ton of these subtopics that I end up not including in the video because they don't follow the story that I'm trying to tell. I know a lot of you have been enjoying the Motherhood in Progress series and are wanting more of it, and so with both those things in mind, I'm really excited to announce my new Patreon, where every month you will get a bonus Motherhood in Progress video. This video will be a follow-up or like an extension of that month's YouTube video, where I get to discuss all these subtopics that didn't make the cut for YouTube. For example, in this month's Patreon video, I talk about how late-stage capitalism can destroy the nuclear family in the same way that it created it, how mothers specifically are more isolated than ever, and how the self-care movement or trend has been a response to this loneliness epidemic. Other perks for signing up are that you get early access to these topics, you get to help vote on which topic I talk about next, and you get to share your own experiences. I want to put some polls up, get your views and, like I said, opinions on the matter, and I can include those in some of the videos when it's applicable. I would just really love to see you guys over there to go more in depth in these topics if, like I said, you've been loving this series. But I also really want to hear your opinions because I'm just here in my own little bubble talking about the topics as far as I know about them. So you can follow the link in the description or just look up Embers and Ash Patreon. You can find me there. I really appreciate anyone who signs up and I'm really excited to hear from you. But now let's get back on track with my final thoughts. So I know this may have come across as me being anti-capitalist, which I want to clarify I am not. There are of course so many great aspects to capitalism, like being able to be self-made, having the opportunity to follow your dreams, and the potential to jump social classes. I just think there are a lot of things missing from our lives that can help balance out the isolation from this capitalist system. As network groups get smaller and smaller, we need to be ever more intentional about building our communities instead of succumbing to the isolation. One of the best things you can do to encourage more third places is to use the ones that you have available in your area. Go to local coffee shops, if only to buy a cup of tea, visit your public parks, go to any local markets that are going on. Just try to find activities in your area and join in. And even if it doesn't result in the creation of more third places, at least you're getting out and socializing. As well, as sad as the loneliness epidemic is, this advisory can be really helpful. Once you realize you're not the only one feeling alone, it can give you the courage to reach out to people and maybe rekindle some friendships. And just in a time where it feels like the world is burning and everything's against you, the best thing you can do for yourself is to reach out to your family and friends and fight for connection.